I'm going to make a very short presentation about what it is the International Year of Water Cooperation. As we have mentioned, I'm in UNESCO, and I'm also in charge of the Division of Water Science and the International Hydrological Program, so the famous PHI. As you have seen, there have been some problems with my computer, so I think that right now that's why the presentation is not really in the right framework, but that's the context. We have got a very complex one in the topic of water. So the amount of pieces of news that we receive every day about the water problems are really bombing us, regarding the non-fulfilled goals of the millennium, regarding that we have been using more water in a quicker way since the population is growing due to problems of floods. 500 million of people per year are suffering from it due to problems of droughts. So we do know too, and we know when we do a technical analysis, there is still enough water at a good technical quality and quantitative level. What do we need to insert technology, innovation, science, technology, and above all to cooperate among ourselves in order to have a positive outcome? That's why we need to have, we thought of having a year of cooperation in order to avoid every problem that are taking place, in order to share their resources, and in order to have a holistic approach of the whole needs of understanding one another around the topic of water. The problem of water, and if you think about it, is different to some other resources, such as oil, which is used, we run out of it and we finish. But water is the water in nature that has been renewing itself through the hydrological cycle. Water is going to be there, and we can disappear as a species, and water will remain there. So water reminds us that there is a kind of continuum, and we have to do also a continuum around water and also a continuum around cooperation too. This is a very complex topic. Why? Because there are many people involved in it, and on the contrary, or opposite to it, many of these bodies of the United Nations, which are always saying that we have to create awareness regarding this water topic, I think we have really created much more awareness that should be desirable. There are many people around water, but this is good. And now what we have to do is to see what each of us has to do in this topic of water. So I think that this creation of awareness is something over. And now we have to practice what each person has to do regarding this little part of the pie that corresponds to each of us regarding the water issue, because there are different perspectives, the perspective of usage, of their own needs. So with this overview, Tajikistan was the one which started to foster and promote that there should be a year of cooperation in favor of water, and this was achieved, and 2013 was appointed in order for that. And in UN Water, UNESCO was appointed as coordinator of water issues in the topic, together with UNS, UNDESA, and with the support of the program of the decade. Well, I have written it here in English in a list, and the program of the UPAC. Why UNESCO? Well, very simply, plain and simple, because they were one of the first bodies of the United Nations to work in water. In 1950, we started to work on water, and then we comprehended every issue. So this was a very big potential to go on. And which are the goals? In order to, well, we have to create awareness not only of the importance of water, but the importance of cooperating in favor of water, increase the knowledge and to build capacities in order to cooperate, to implement new actions and to search for new actions around water, and to reinforce the cooperation strategies. Who is this campaign addressed to? Very simply, to everyone individually, everyone as a user, everyone as nations, as organizations, as international ones or national ones too. And also the idea is that through being UN Water as the cell with 29 bodies of the United Nations and approximately, I think that we have got more or less 59 organizations, or 58, I don't know exactly. so part of the United Nations, and part of them are not belonging to the United Nations, and this course should be a little drop. That should be a start promoting and fostering some waves around these water cooperations, which are going to be the key messages. To cooperate around water is going to be essential for peace and sustainable development. And this is a key factor in the eradication of poverty, for the social equity, and for the balance of gender balance. And it also creates benefits at the economical level, and it is essential to preserve the natural resources and to protect the environment. We have got many events, some of them are keys. One of them starts today, and it is really the very first event this year, which takes place today in Zaragoza. And we are also going to hold another event, so this formal launching or kick-off of this cooperation year in Paris, 11th February, 22nd of March. We're going to organize many events around water. One of them will take place in the Netherlands, another one in New York. And it has been announced a third one in Brazil. So we have got different events along the year. We have made a bid in order to select the motto, the slogan. 12,000 have been proposed for that. And the one which has been water, water everywhere, only we have to share, and then they have to present it in Paris. And we are going to invite you to visit this website of cooperation, where material is found in order to disseminate the event, to make your own logo, and many other systems which we have got. And we also invite you to put the material, to contribute with the material you've got. And this is not only to be read, but this is only for you to have an idea of the huge amount of events we have proposed. And in the 365 days, we should have at least one event each day. So those can be really very tiny events of every kind. But the important thing is to register them, because at the end of the year we can say what did it change, not only what events have been held, but what are the changes implemented. I'm going to finish with this, so thank you very much indeed.
And now I'm going to turn to our boss here, Josefina Maistu. Josefina, she's the director of the UN Office to Support Water for Life for the Decade, and she's also the coordinator of the Water Decade on Advocacy and Communication. Josefina has also a career on economics, environment. It would be too long to talk about all that. So Josefina, you have the floor to talk about the overview of the conference, I understand.
Thank you, thank you. Change there to the computer. ¿Te llevas el ya está puesta. Okay, hello. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and warm welcome from me. Thank you very much for all your efforts to get here, and I hope it is really worthwhile. The role of my presentation is to give you an overview of what we are going to do in the next 3 days, and hopefully by the end you will understand why we are here. We have already heard from Blanca the issues of the needs for greater cooperation due to the important pressures that are coming out, and I'm not going to go through them, but it is important to know that there is a renewed need to talk about cooperation today that maybe there wasn't before. We will also know that the cooperation has many benefits. Blanca has mentioned them as well. And there are benefits for equity and poverty reduction, for development, for the environment, and for peace. And these are the things we are going to discuss at lunchtime today. We have a side event on the World Water Day. And the World Water Day will focus mainly on the benefits of cooperation, because believe it or not everybody thinks cooperation is needed. And I think there was quite a lot of discussions in Rio+20 on issues of cooperation. And so we still need to highlight the benefits. And that's why the World Water Day is going to do a very important job to make sure that we all agree that there is some benefits here. So we will have a presentation from the government of the Netherlands together with UNESCO, where we are going to have the opportunity to discuss and to give them some feedback on the work they are doing. And I will encourage you to go to this meeting because they really need our help. Okay. In Zaragoza, we have decided to go a step further in relation to the benefits and in relation to cooperation. So we are not only talking about why we need to cooperate, which is the benefit side, but we are also talking about how we need to cooperate. What makes cooperation happen? You know, what is the specifics? And this is why we are focusing on the tools of cooperation. And we are focusing, obviously, on the legal, institutional, financial. You have some information briefs out there that provides the context of the different tools. Okay? So but we are very interested in how they are implemented in practice. And that's why you are here. You have all the, you know, all of you come from your countries, they all come from your experiences, your communities, and they are all coming to share with us your experiences. And we want to know how it happens in practice. So we are not, this is not an academic presentation. This is not about, you know, how you're preaching people how they have to do things, but we are really trying to learn from your own experiences on how things have been happening. And we know we need these tools because of the complexity of water, and I'm not going to go through this because Blanca has already done that. And we already have a considerable amount of information and work having been done in relation to institutions and in relation to the legal framework. And we will have Julia Trombicana from UNECE giving us a presentation on this. And it doesn't mean that we have already solved these problems of having the good institutional frameworks and good legal frameworks. We still have to work at that. And but the focus of the conference is really to try to draw lessons specifically on the experiences on the use of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. UNESCO, the PCCP program that Lena Salami is also giving us a presentation today, has been working for quite a long time trying to highlight the importance of these alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, trying to make sure that we understand that cooperation doesn't happen just by having laws, or having institutions. It happens in the practice, in your practice of every day. And you know, I'm not going to tell you because we are here to learn from you, but this is basically the focus of the conference. So the conference will highlight the importance of mediation, of water diplomacy, and I hope the people from Foreign Affairs here realize, you know, that we think that's important with your work that you are doing, negotiation at transnational, but also at national, local levels. So cooperation is at all the scales, and that's what we are trying to highlight as well. So the themes are mediation, participatory approaches, water diplomacy, and the focus is on transboundary cooperation, river basins, rural areas, and cities. And in the cities, we have quite a combination from the cooperation of businesses, of water operators, and local actors. So if you can see the mix here, we are really getting out of the box. We are not only talking about water companies providing water services to the citizens, we are really talking a lot about the water users themselves, you know, the companies as water users. So, why are we here? Well, you know, there's plenty of meetings going around the world, so it seems to me that, you know, we have to really justify why we are here as well. So, I think ensuring cooperation requires that we have to learn to do a lot better in negotiation and dispute resolution, and to learn a lot faster than we have in the past. So we have to really accelerate the process of learning. There is experiences across the world and common approaches that can help. So these are no news. It is not that it is unusual. It happens all the time. Maybe we haven't highlighted already enough, maybe, Elena. Maybe this is the idea. The idea is that there is already experiences, a lot of is being done there, and maybe it is not enough on the political processes, this kind of knowledge, this kind of experiences. So we also hope that this conference will inspire participants to do better, highlighting some of the crucial ingredients for success in negotiation and dispute resolution. I do realize that it is difficult a lot of the times to talk about processes. People are more used to talk about the structures, institutions, legal frameworks. It's much more difficult to talk about processes. But we hope, with the help of Lena here, we will be able to really get into it. And we also want to identify the general, locally specific difficulties. We realize that there is no one receives for everybody. You know, there is a specificities at local level that then it needs to be highlighted. This conference is a cooperative effort. So from us, from the River Basin Authority, the support of the Zaragoza Council has been and is continuing to be very important. But obviously the main protagonism of this event is UNESCO, who's the lead agency taking the lead on the International Year of Cooperation, and we will all be supporting them, and this is part of it, of course. UNECE, who has done a fantastic job in getting all the experiences from the region to this conference. The Global Compact, the CEO Water Mandate, I think Jason hasn't arrived yet, but he will be coming soon. The Global Water Operators Partnership Alliance, so thank you very much, of UN Habitat. The International Fund for Agriculture and Development, here is Rudolf. Hello, thank you very much. The International Water and Sanitation Center, IRC, I don't know, Marieke, if I know you, thank you. And the United Nations Environmental Programme, so thank you. And the World Bank, yeah. Okay. Cooperation experiences we are going to see, they are from different regions, we don't have them all. In Europe, we have the Sava Basin, so Dejan, thank you. We have Tisza from Hungary, Kovacs, thank you. We have the cooperation between Spain and Portugal. We have the Russian-Finland cooperation, so thank you very much for your presence here. From Asia, we have Jordan, India. Who is coming from India? Thank you. Myanmar, which you would do it. Africa, we have Ethiopia, Kenya. Yes, Madagascar, Morocco. I don't know how we have our friend from Morocco hasn't come. No, no, okay. South Africa, Senegal Basin. Tamsir, thank you very much for making it here. From Latin America, we have Bolivia. Yes, hello, very welcome. Peru. Yes, and Guatemala. Yes, okay. I don't know whether I missed any of the presentations, but I think, so you can see we have quite a good mix of people here, so thank you very much. We have over 120 participants, so they're key experts in water cooperation, representatives from government authorities, from the cases, and from UN Water. I hope you enjoy the mix of participants here today. So the outputs of the conference will be documented cases, a synthesis of lessons learned, the proceedings, of course, information briefs you already have, and hopefully we will also help the World Water Day and the International Year of Cooperation in their organization. In day one, which is today, apart from the opening, the point of the opening is really to provide the framework. I know it's a little bit more boring. We tried to make this conference a little bit more active, but the opening, the idea is to see how this conference fits in the overall process of the UN system at the moment. So that's why we are giving all these more like presentations. Later on, hopefully, will be more dialogues and debates. Okay, so then the first session is going to be about furthering water cooperation between nations and between stakeholders, which will be chaired by Blanca and also by Julia from UNECE. We have this lunchtime event. As I say, I encourage you to come here. We will have to go downstairs quickly for lunch and come up if you want to be in the side event, and I promise it's going to be interesting. And then after the second part of session one that takes place in the afternoon, we will have a workshop water game that hopefully is going to be also interesting, exciting, and we will provide for an interactive opportunity to all of us. Today is going to be a very intensive day, so we are going to be a little tired at the end of the day. We have two side events, one on World Water Week, and I think we have Karen, hello, thank you very much for coming, from SIWI, who's come all the way here to encourage you to go to the World Water Week. And we have the UN Global Compact also coming to present as the CEO Water Mandate and the Water Action Cup. This evening at 8:30, leaving at 8 o'clock from here, from the venue, we will have the official welcome in the Aljaferia, which is a beautiful palace, and I think it will be really worth it too for all of you to go. We have a tourist visit, and then we'll have the reception. On day two, we will be looking at local cooperation. On day two, we will change places, and people who are in the back now will come to the front and the other way around. And Rudolf has brought a group of people who is very interesting, and I hope that we will really enjoy the interactive formula that he has designed for that session. So in the morning, we will be talking about cooperation in irrigation cooperatives. There will be some irrigation cooperatives from Spain coming here, I think about about 10 presidents of irrigation cooperatives will also be coming. And then in the afternoon, we will be talking about cooperation in cities, from water operators, from the businesses, and also from the cities themselves, from the stakeholder platforms. We have a side event on intensively developed aquifers and also an informal meeting of the post-2015 agenda. No, it's not post-2012, sorry, post-2015 agenda. And the ODS process with UNICEF here, Jose Gesti will run this together with Bertie Font. On day 3 is a side event on Spain, so those who are interested, please come. The idea is to show you cooperation in action. Okay, so that's the idea. And I have asked people deliberately not to tell us only the good things, but also to tell us the bad things. So the things who work and the things who don't work, because I don't think it's believable if it's only the things that work. And then in the afternoons, we will have a site visits. We'll have a bus taking us to one of the irrigation cooperatives, which is the biggest in Spain. I think it's probably the biggest water manager in Spain in terms of how much water they manage. And also to the Zaragoza water cluster, which is the grouping of people, how they get together to try to maximize the synergies within Zaragoza in terms of working in water. So the conference design is open, it's interactive, it's inclusive, it's inspiring, hopefully. It's a learning space and it's a practical event. And we try to engage all in the conference through the presenters and panelists who provide insights, the facilitators and chairs who help us to focus on results and to work in small groups to try to make the system more interactive. We will have in the early mornings some recap that I'll do it myself and to try to provide some ideas on what happened we done the day before. And we will have side events as well and field visits. So, a lot of efforts in communicating in this conference. And as you can see, we will have a daily newsletter, so you might be interviewed, by the way. We will have video interviews. You will be interviewed. I think Stephanie will do some interviews, and Carlos Garriga, I don't know whether he's around, he will also do some interviews, so I would be grateful. He will do it in Spanish, and Stephanie will do them in English, so please, if you are contacted by them, they will do video interviews, so please help them. We will be in Twitter. We are supposed to be webcast. I don't know whether it's been working because somehow by putting the presentation, it got disconnected, but I hope we are being webcast. And we will have press conference as normal, etc. So as you see, we are a communication office. We are putting a lot of efforts in communication. What's next? There is a lot of happening next. Blanca has told us that there is a lot of happening. I encourage you to participate in World Water Day. There is a high-level dialogue also in New York in the international agenda. And we have that lessons learned document that I have sent all of you. Okay? So that will constitute more or less the basis for the conclusions of the conference. We will do also a report. There are two people here at the back who are going to be reporting on the conference, Carlos Mario and Maite. But basically, the lessons learned will be amended with your inputs, and it's already been prepared with your inputs. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josefina. So I understand we have to go on a little boring session. So Julia is coming at the floor. We have heard about the Basin Authority Ebro. This is an institution which works. It's a model. We have a climate convention. We have a biodiversity convention. We have a fight against desertification convention. But we don't have an international convention on water. Why? Is it local or? So we have the General Assembly has decided that access to water and sanitation is a human right, so you have to implement it. But by the way, we do have some treaties on water. We do have some treaties on water. We actually have 2 treaties on water, but one is the United Nations Economic Commission in Europe, and Yula is working there, and she's in the secretariat of this convention. And the other one is on Water Course Convention, but it's not yet been ratified. So, Julia, talk to us about all these conventions and these treaties, the legal side of it.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I will indeed focus on the 2 international conventions on water. One of them is the 97 Convention on the Law of Non-Navigational Uses of International Watercourses, the so-called UN Watercourses Convention, or the New York Convention. And the other one is the 1992 Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes, which is also called the UNECE Water Convention or the Helsinki Convention. And such focus today in the International Year of Water Cooperation is not by chance, because this year will be a historic year for both of these instruments. The 97 UN Watercourses Convention was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 1997 on the basis of the 94 draft articles by the International Law Commission, which were negotiated for about 3 decades by countries coming from all continents, and was voted for by over 100 United Nations member states. It was from the very beginning negotiated as a global framework multilateral instrument, which had the deriving consequences on the needs to reconcile the various positions of the various countries. It is an instrument which is strongly recognized as an evidence of international customary law, and such recognition came from the International Court of Justice, first of all in the case concerning the Gabčíkova-Nagya Mareš project in 1997. And this convention has already had a great influence on many specific agreements in various basins, including the South Africa Development Community Revised Protocol, the Albufeira Convention, and many more. This convention is not yet into force. It has been sleeping for about a decade, but it has seen a remarkable number of ratifications in the last 3 years. Currently, it is missing only 6 ratifications in order to come into force, and it is expected that it will come into force end of 2013, beginning of 2014. The countries which ratified this convention are on the screen, and in blue you see highlighted the names of those countries which are also parties to the UNECE Water Convention. The 92 UNECE Water Convention was negotiated in the beginning of the 90s through an intergovernmental process under the auspices of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. So the UNECE provided the venue and the framework for negotiations. It still hosts the secretariat of this convention, although the Economic Commission for Europe in no other way influences this convention. And when the negotiators had to draft this Helsinki Convention, they had an explicit mandate to rely on the work being done by the International Law Commission on the draft articles on non-navigational uses of international watercourses. So this convention was negotiated as a regional instrument. It came into force rather quickly, in 4 years, and it was later enhanced by 2 legally binding protocols. One protocol on the water and health, which is in force for 25 state parties, and another protocol, the protocol on civil liability, adopted in 2003 and not yet into force. So this is a convention with 20 years of history. You can see on the map, thank you, that it covers now practically the entire UNECE region, and it has generated 20 years of history and activities. We are often asked, how did it happen that 2 instruments on the same subject matter were negotiated almost at the same time in the 90s? And there is a multidimensional answer to this question. First of all, when the UNECE countries were negotiating the Helsinki Convention, it was not at all clear how long will it take the ILC to finalize the draft articles and how long will it take to negotiate a global convention. Also, it was obviously easier to agree on a legally binding document in a smaller group of countries, which the UNECE countries did. And at that time, the breakup of the former Soviet Union and generally of the former Soviet bloc created new political changes on the map of Europe, and the UNEC Convention came just in time to respond to these challenges. In 2003, the parties to the UNEC Convention amended this convention, opening it up for participation by non-United Nations Economic Commission for Europe member states. So with these amendments, the convention is potentially becoming a global instrument. And at that time, in 2003, the parties were motivated by a number of objectives. Of course, they wanted to make the principles of the convention applicable worldwide. They also wanted to share the experience that they accumulated with this convention. And they wanted to learn from other regions of the world. These amendments, which make the convention a global instrument, will enter into force on the 6th of February 2013. And the possibility for all United Nations member states to accede to this convention will be in the late 2013, beginning of 2014, when all parties of the Helsinki Convention will have ratified the amendments. Just 2 months ago, we had the 6th session of the meeting of the parties of the UNEC Water Convention taking place in Rome. And this was really a historic meeting because the parties unanimously adopted a decision to grant, once and for all, the approval to all future requests by non-ECE member states. Also, this was the meeting which was attended by 18 non-United Nations Economic Commission for Europe states. And at this meeting, 2 non-UNEC states, Iraq and Tunisia, expressed their interest to accede to the convention as soon as this is possible. There had been numerous studies on the compatibility of the 2 conventions, and they concluded that the conventions are compatible. They are based on the 2 same substantive principles, the principle of equitable and reasonable utilization and the due diligence obligation of not causing a significant harm, which are enhanced by the obligation of cooperation as a catalyst or as a support tool to implement the 2 substantive obligations. There are also almost same principles with regard to the dispute settlement in both conventions, with some very minor differences as to the compulsory fact-finding in the UN Watercourses Convention. And there are plenty of examples about how one convention can clarify and complement obligations and the substantive content of obligations present in the other. For example, the UN Watercourses Convention is complementary to the UNECE Helsinki Convention with regard to the factors to equitable and reasonable utilization, with regard to the planned measures, with regard to the consequences of the occurrence of transboundary harm, whereas on the other way around, the UNECE Helsinki Convention can be complementary to the UN Watercourses Convention when it comes to the content of specific agreements between riparian states, when it comes to the tasks of the joint bodies and institutions by the riparian states, when it comes to the water quality objectives and criteria, or when it comes to the information to be exchanged. And there are many more examples which can show these linkages of complementarity. Are there differences between the 2 conventions? Of course there are. There are few differences. For example, confined groundwater is not covered by the UN Watercourses Convention. There is an intellectual property ground for limitation of exchange of information between the riparians under the UNECE Water Convention, which is not present in the Watercourses Convention. There is an obligation to adapt the existing agreement to the basic provisions in the UNECE Water Convention, whereas the UN Watercourses Convention does not disturb the existing agreements. And there is one major difference between the 2 conventions. The Helsinki Convention is much more stronger on the institutional cooperation of riparian states, First of all, it makes it an obligation of the riparian parties to enter into agreements with regard to their specific basins, as well as to establish joint bodies and institutions for cooperation in specific basins, whereas this is only a recommendation in the United Nations Watercourses Convention. And secondly, the Helsinki Convention establishes an institutional mechanism based on the meeting of the parties, and such mechanism is currently lacking in the UN Watercourses Convention. And this difference shall not be underestimated. The United Nations, the UNEC Water Convention of 1992 has its meeting of the parties, meeting every 3 years, supported by the Bureau, supported by a number of working groups, by a number of task forces. It is supported by the Secretariat based in UNEC. It implements the 3-year work programs, which include the adoption of binding instruments such as protocols, the adoption of soft law instruments such as guidelines, the implementation of regular assessments, and a number of projects on the ground. So it is a living instrument with high ownership by the parties, which also involves in its work the non-parties, NGOs, international organizations. The International Law Commission has been recently working on the issue of fragmentation in international law. And in 2006, it has produced a report on this issue, which concludes that when several norms bear on a single issue, they should, to the extent possible, be interpreted so as to give rise to a single set of compatible obligations. And this principle of harmonization has already been taken on board by the UNEC Water Convention, which in its guide to implementing the convention adopted by the meeting of the parties in 2009 has already interpreted many obligations of the UNEC Water Convention in line with the Watercourses Convention and in line with the ILC commentary to the draft articles. So how will these two documents coexist? How will they work together? Of course, the important thing is to have a very open and constructive discussion which takes into account the reality and which is at the same time visionary in terms of the future challenges and in terms of the future and current constraints. And it is very good that such a discussion has already started. On the screen, you have a number of events where the debate has already taken place. And we also hope that the upcoming debate on the water SDG may provide opportunities for this kind of discussion. The new work program of the Water Convention for 2013-2015 explicitly includes the area of building synergies and coordination with the New York Convention into this work program. And also, the implementation committee, which was recently established for the UNEC Water Convention, may play a crucial role in bringing the two conventions together, especially taking into account that Professor Stephen McCaffrey, who was the father of the UN Watercourses Convention, became a member of the implementation committee for the UNEC Water Convention. But this open and constructive discussion is very important, but of course it is up to the parties to both instruments to decide how do they see them working together. The United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, in his message to the meeting of the parties of the UNEC Water Convention, underscored the invaluable experience gathered by the parties to this convention and encourage countries from outside the UNEC region to join the Water Convention. In the same message, he also said that the globalization of the Water Convention should go hand in hand with the expected entry into force of the UN Watercourses Convention. These two instruments are based on the same principles, they complement each other and should be implemented in a coherent manner. And I would like to conclude with the following example. Just a month ago, the Republic of Moldova and Ukraine, after a decade of negotiations, concluded a bilateral treaty on the Dniester River basin. It is a 40-page treaty with over 30 articles and 5 annexes, and this treaty is a unique modern-age treaty which takes the best from the two conventions. Both parties, Moldova and Ukraine, had been parties to the UNEC Water Convention for a number of years. But when they negotiated this treaty, they went much further than UNEC Water Convention. They have taken a lot of additional issues not covered by UNEC Water Convention, but covered by the UN Watercourses Convention. They have also actually gone further than these two conventions by addressing additional issues relevant for their cooperation. And this example shows how the two conventions can be a very good complementary and supportive to the cooperation of the countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Julia. So now you have a message to go back to your political leaders. Ratify the conventions, please. So this is one of the legal instruments for cooperation. This is the central matter of this conference. So we have actually some legal frameworks. We have some institution models. And so we're going to have also after the cases. But there are still disputes. And so now we shall turn to the specialist of how do we solve these disputes. So we'll give the floor to Lena Salame, who is a lawyer also, but also a mediator and a negotiator, and who's going to tell us all about how can you avoid conflicts in water uses. Lena Salame, you have the floor.
Days. Because we give a training in dispute resolution techniques, and then usually it takes at least 10 days to cover all the topics that I have to cover here. So Josefina really challenged me, 10 minutes. So if you have the impression that I'm quick, you're probably right, and you can stop me if you want, okay? So ADR, what is it? When do we do it? Where, who, how, and most importantly, why? Okay? ADR are, I will come back to that. So first of all, we're talking about disputes and conflicts. What are conflicts? Actually, conflict existed forever between humans and even in animal kingdoms. And forever, people have tried to solve conflicts using their traditional way, indigenous ways, and more westernized ways and tools to address them. Conflict arises as soon as there is a disagreement between two or more people who perceive that their interests are opposing or their objectives are opposing. So if, for example, now I just consider that we have to open the door and Josefina considers that we have to close it, we already have a conflict. It doesn't mean that we're going to start a war against each other. So we have to make a difference between a conflict and an armed conflict. So whenever we talk about conflict, please don't conclude immediately that we're talking about wars. And this is very important when we're talking about water, because we always have water conflicts, but it doesn't always mean that we have water wars. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing is that conflicts are not always bad. They are sometimes an opportunity to bring a change, to change a statu quo that is maybe disadvantageous to some of the parties. This is the second thing. A third message that I want to give you quickly about conflict. Conflicts and cooperation always coexist together. You never have conflict alone or cooperation alone. They always coexist at the same time to different extents. Okay? So these are the basic things that I wanted to tell you about conflicts. Now, how do we solve them? There is something called alternative dispute resolution techniques. In the 70s, in the US, this is very loud. In the US, there was a tendency to put some structure over things that have been done forever, that you all do forever. But they put a name on it and they called it alternative dispute resolution techniques, and it's a spectrum of approaches that can be used to solve a conflict And they go from litigation to negotiation, and somewhere along the spectrum you have arbitration, mediation, and so on, consensus building, and so on. Now, there are two schools. There's a school who includes litigation in this spectrum, and another school who excludes litigation and say that alternative dispute resolution techniques are alternative to going to court, to litigation. But this is not important. The important thing is that ADR are all the approaches that are used to solve a conflict in a non-confrontational way. So as long as you don't use arms, you are in ADR. Okay? Now we're going to look at a few examples of these ADR techniques. First of all, adjudication. Where does it happen? And how long does it take? For a long time, there was only one water case that was brought to the International Court of Justice between two countries, Gabčíkovo and Gabčíkovo-Nagymaros dams. This is the story between Slovakia and Hungary, who signed in 1977 a treaty to develop a part of the Danube for hydropower, flood control, navigation control, and so on. And in '89, there was a small problem. Hungary considered that, I will say it in very short, I cannot tell them all the details, so please bear with me if there are details and subtleties that I'm missing. This is the key person who can give you details later. So in '89, Hungary stopped the implementation of the project because it considered that it's going to harm the environment of the Danube in the portion around Budapest. So Slovakia went ahead and implemented a variant of the project unilaterally. Then both countries decided to go together to court. Now, this is one thing about adjudication in international law. You don't sue another country. So if Lebanon is not happy with Syria, for example, it doesn't sue Syria. They have to both agree to go to the International Court of Justice. And in the '77 treaty, Hungary and Slovakia had a provision of conflict resolution, and they had decided that if we have a problem, we will go to the International Court of Justice. And they did. And this whole story took about more or less 10 years, after which the International Court of Justice recommended to both countries to go back and negotiate in good faith. Okay? So I'll let you with this thought. I will leave you with this thought. I will go to a recent case. This is the case between Uruguay and Argentina, the famous pulp mill case. Uruguay has authorized the construction of pulp mills on the river Uruguay, and in 2005, activists from the Argentinian side made big riots and blockages, and they even blocked the big bridge that links the two countries over the river Uruguay, claiming that these pulp mills are polluting the river. And again, both countries had a treaty in which they had agreed that they would take their conflict to the International Court of Justice in case it arises. And they went to the International Court of Justice. It took about 5 years for the International Court of Justice to say that indeed Uruguay has harmed Argentina by not notifying Argentina ahead of time of the constructions of the pulp mills. However, the court did not say that the pulp mills have to be destroyed or stopped. And so it didn't really, it didn't also cover other issues that were in the conflict. And as a result of this, the conflict was really resolved when both governments, the presidents of both countries, really met. Even after the decision of the Court of Justice, they had to meet, they had to negotiate, and they ended up signing an agreement for the management of the river Uruguay. So in both cases, you see It took a lot of time, it took a lot of resources, a lot of energy, money, people, lawyers. In the meantime, the environment was deteriorating and the needs of the people were not being taken into account. So I'm not saying that going to court is bad, but I'm saying that depending on the case, there are dispute resolution techniques that are more or less adapted. This is on one extreme of the spectrum of ADR techniques. Now we have the other side, the other extreme is negotiation. Negotiation is only when two people, is a party-to-party dispute resolution technique. There are as many definitions of negotiation as there are people who are negotiating, okay? But a simple one is a situation when two or more people are trying to influence each other. Everybody doesn't negotiate. Who thinks he never negotiates? Everybody, babies negotiate. I negotiate with myself every day. When I'm in a supermarket in front of a bag of chips, I decide, do I take it, do I not take it? And whatever I decide, I lose, right? So we all negotiate every day. And but the important thing is to make sure that during the process of negotiation, we aim at satisfying our interests very well, but the interest of the counterpart in a satisfactory manner, because their happiness is our business. If they're not happy with the result of the negotiation, then our agreement is not going to be implemented, not going to be sustainable on the long term. So we want a negotiation that satisfies our interests very well, the interest of our counterpart in a satisfactory manner, and does take into account the interest of parties who are not at the negotiation table, but who are concerned by our negotiation. We want a negotiation that gives us an agreement that is better than our BATNA, our best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So everything that we can have outside of the agreement is an option, but if we stay in the negotiation, we want something better than our other alternatives. We want a negotiation that takes into account many options, because the more options we have in a negotiation, the more interest we're going to cover, and the better we are off. Then it has to be based on fair standards. It has to build a good working relationship. It has to be based on efficient and effective communication, and it has to result in a clear and operational agreement. We can discuss this for a whole week, but I'll be happy to do that maybe in the break if somebody is interested. Now, do you recognize yourself in a negotiation process? We have the compromising person, the person who's lost, the person who's very fast, the dreamer, we have the leader and the followers, we have the multitasking person, we have the person who's always in a hurry, we have the person who is a procedure person, who always wants time out to figure out administrative issues, we have the stubborn person, we have the optimistic person, the pessimistic person, the bullying person, the slow one, the person who thinks he's going to save the process with his ideas, the friendly person, the shark, and we have the creative person. Do you know who you are? Do you recognize yourself? Be the creative one, okay? Be the creative one, because the more things you create, the more options you bring to the table, the more chances you reach an agreement and to cover your interest, their interest, and the interest of even third parties who are outside of the room. An example of being creative in a negotiation process between USA and Canada on the Columbia River basin, there was an agreement that Canada would hold the water to control floods in the US, and then releases it when the US would need water to generate hydropower. And then, as a kickback, Canada would get 50% of the benefits for having rendered a service in controlling the floods for the US. So in a way, both countries were happy. They did not control only or share only the water resources, but also the benefits that derive from managing the water resources. And this is also feasible in an easy manner because both needs are 6 months out of phase. So this is it's a very simple example of creating benefits that can increase the chances of cooperation and agreement. Mediation. Why do we need that? We need that when people who are supposed to be negotiating from party to party get to a phase where they cannot really communicate. So a third party comes, a mediator comes, and supports the negotiation process. The mediation, usually the mediator does not take a decision. The mediator just supports the dialogue between the parties in a conflict. And facilitates the process, tries to investigate the interest on both sides, and try to make the parties communicate. An example, there are so many examples of mediation, and you all probably know them, so I don't need to be very late, but for example, in the Zambezi River, between 11 riparian states, the Vatican had, for example, presented its services as a mediator and helped the countries to come up with an agreement on the management of the water resource. Consensus building, when does it happen? Consensus building is when we have all the parties concerned with a conflict involved in the dialogue. I give you right away an example. In San Antonio, in the city of San Antonio, Texas, there was a proposal to build a water reservoir to increase the water distribution in the city. There was already a reservoir, and there was a proposal to build another reservoir. And of course, people were for it, others were against it, and the negotiation, the dialogue stopped, it stalled. There was a deadlock. And when there was a deadlock, a proposal came up that we have to bring to the table all the, oh, I'm so sorry, I will be very quick, all the people who are involved in the process. And everybody came in, the environmentalists, the people who are against the anti-reservoir activists, the armed forces, because there were army bases, the local government representatives, everybody came in, and the process came up with the decision that there was actually no need for a second reservoir, only there was a need to renew the first one and manage it in a better way. Now, this is all nice, but some conflict resolution techniques that I already presented don't really work in some communities who feel that they have their own conflict resolution techniques. That's what we call the traditional conflict resolution approaches or water management approaches. And they are really good because they are part of the culture of the people, and they have the advantage of being part of their normal behavior. So they feel ownership. People feel ownership for their traditional ways of solving conflicts. So it's very nice to come and impose a mediation process. However, if people do not feel ownership, they do not feel comfortable with this process, then there is no follow-up, and there won't be any real resolution of a conflict. I will give you 3 examples very quickly. The sulha. Sulha comes from the word musalaha, which means reconciliation, and it's very much used between Berbers or between Bedouins in the Middle East and in Morocco. And this sulha it's also used in water management, and it's being revived as a conflict resolution approach. It's usually very efficient in these communities because they feel it's part of their culture. And when a group has decided to solve the conflict with the sulha, the agreement is applicable to the whole tribe or family that is involved in the dialogue, for the actual generation and even for future generations. So this works in the communities that I mentioned. Another one is the Tribunal de las Aguas in Valencia. It's 1,000 years old. It was inscribed as a World Heritage on the World Heritage List of UNESCO in 2009. Every Thursday, in front of the Cathedral of Valencia, the members of the Water Tribunal meet, and they meet to actually discuss the water issues and water conflicts that can happen, that can take place between farmers that use of fields for agricultural products for Spain and for exporting out of Spain. So this is also a traditional way of managing water, managing the conflicts that can arise from these resources. A third one is the Arvari Parliament. It was established as a conflict resolution body to tackle the problems of a small river in Rajasthan. You can see the details on the slide. I won't go over it, but it follows principles of Gandhi for participatory, equitable, and decentralized paradigm for water management, and it works also in the region because people in the region feel ownership for this. It is part of their culture and it is part of their way of being. Finally, whether you are in a process of traditional conflict resolution technique or you are involved in an indigenous or traditional way of resolving a conflict, just try to be creative. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And this brings us to the end of the first session, Josefina. Yeah. We are right on time. Isn't it fantastic? The first time it ever happened. So I leave my place now. Thank you. And Blanca and Julia, and you're going to present us the second session. Thank you so much for this first session.